Then I say the next section deals with the differences between the various yoga systems of attainment in Buddhism. Now, these yoga systems are actually a little bit difficult to comprehend, or the distinctions between them. And I want to simplify it or make it a little bit easy for you. You can look up these yoga systems in any decent book on Buddhist book, specifically on yoga meditation, and they'll normally give you lists of the various forms of yoga. All of you are aware of the three main forms, which is Hatha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. And this particular text gives different names for them. And so it's somewhat important to understand those names. Now we're going into the various yoga systems of attainment in Buddhism. And there's 12 statements here. And the 12 statements I have here just roughly scribbled down, though it's not in my book, I didn't explain it in my book at all, do relate to the 12 signs of the zodiac, or really to the 12 petals of the heart. And that's the reason why there's 12 statements. This is, of course, written by Master Jupiter or Guru Rinpoche. And anything written by such an enlightened being has to have every aspect of it esoterically correct. And if you're talking about the yoga systems or the meditation systems, then it has to be the heart, the awakening of the petals of the heart. The beginning of it all is Aries, right? The first sign of the zodiac, the will aspect. So this is technical Buddhism, and so it's difficult to properly explain because the Buddhists, as our brothers know, have their own terminology, and that terminology is quite specific. For instance, they use lots of numbers. For instance, you all have heard of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And so there's all these 4s and 8s and 5s and 7s and 16s and whatever, all the way through Buddhism, and they know what they mean, but we don't. We actually have to consult some sort of compendium of Buddhism to actually understand what they're referring to. So even though pious attendants and hermit Buddhas claim that they understand the single nature of mind, which is what this book's all about, as the partial absence of self, they do not understand it exactly as it is. Now, when they're talking about hermit Buddhists and pious attendants, they're talking about the Theravada tradition, the Hinayana. And so their philosophy is the pious attendants of the Buddha. They follow the Tripitaka, the original talks of the Buddha. They don't go much beyond that. And therefore they attend to the Buddha, like all of the disciples of the Buddha at his time. They're at that level. They haven't really moved from that. And that's what pious attendants mean. One of the bhikshus, our two brothers are bhikshus. That's the Sanskrit term for what they are. So, and hermit Buddhas is called Pratchika Buddha. They're self-realized ones. And this is the objective of Theravada Buddhism. So there's two forms of Buddhism. One is the Mahayana. And when we were talking earlier to them, I said there's two streams that they follow, their monastery. And one is the Theravada, which is the school of pious attendants. And then there's the Mahayana, which is the Zen tradition. And the Zen tradition, the Mahayana or the Zen, is still one of the two main groups of the Mahayana, which is the Yogacarya and your Madhyamika. And so they have different views, so to speak. One has got to do with the mind. Mind is all there is. And the Madhyamika has got to do with the void. Everything is empty. The two schools actually agree, but just different emphasis. So the hermit Buddhas are Pratchika Buddhas, and what their focus is not, the Mahayana tradition is the bodhisattva vow, to never cease striving until all sentient beings are released from suffering. The Theravada is not so much concerned with that. The Theravada is concerned with self-enlightenment, their own enlightenment. They don't understand that Gautama was a Mahayana Buddhist. As soon as he gained his enlightenment, he had two options. And he spent according to the story, I forgot how many days, contemplating whether he was simply going to be a Pachika Buddha, a self-realized one, and not give out this profound teaching, or to give out the teachings. As soon as he decided to give out the teachings, and therefore find his 5 that were his fellow yogins or hermits early on, and give out the teachings, what's called the Dhammacakra, the teaching of the turning of the wheel of the law, to them, the whole Mahayana tradition technically started. He was no longer a Pachika Buddha, he was a Manyusi Buddha. But the hermit Buddhas are those that are self-realized for themselves. The Theravada tradition, they think they understand the nature of mind, but the Mahayana tradition says no, they do not understand it. They only understand it as the partial absence of self, but they have to go fully further to properly understand the nature of mind. They do not understand it exactly as it is. And so it all starts with the Theravada, the self-realized ones, the yoga tradition of the Buddha himself, Gautama, because he was a yogin's yogin, he was very ascetic, there's images of him with ribs sticking out, and that's the martial aspect, the Aryan quality that brought that about. And then we go to Taurus, and this is really also the history of Buddhism. And with Taurus, which is the wisdom aspect, and so you're going from the martial aspect or the hatha yoga more, trying to receive impressions via austerities, to the Buddha's methodology, and the Buddha is Taurian, right? Wesak is in Taurus. Furthermore, being fettered by opinions held in accordance with their respective literature and philosophical systems, there are those who do not perceive the inner radiance directly. And here we're going into the growth of all the various Buddhist schools, something like 100 to 200 years after the death of Gautama. Some of these schools have died out. There's no literature extant. This is before Mahayana. They're just various different Theravada schools and philosophical schools. The atomic school, for instance, where they have the atoms, the concept of thought, indivisible particles. So they had all sorts of thought. Thinking is the concept of lots of these little particles put together in a stream. So they all have their different Sanskrit terms and names. There's something like 20, 21 or 22 or whatever schools. I don't want to go into this, it's not important. My other books mention these schools. I think volume 1 goes into this and gives a diagram of them. And you can go to that and learn these schools and some of their philosophies. But this is the Taurian manifestation, right? It went into arguments between different philosophical views. And this actually is also quite a Hindu thing, different dialectical sort of arguments, lots of rhetoric. That's what the Buddha didn't want to get into. Therefore, he didn't talk about God, any of these things. Didn't want to get into that philosophy, those arguments. He just wanted to go straight into, this is the method of liberation. So there are those that do not perceive the inner radiance directly. In other words, all this philosophical debate does not give you a direct experience of what mind really is. They're all really just skirting around the edges with their mentalistic concepts. They come to good ideas, but the ideas are either wrong or partly wrong or right, but not the enlightenment. Then we go back again to the Theravada. We started off with hermit Buddhas in number 1, and this is now Gemini. So Gemini are the twins, right? There's the immortal brother and the mortal brother. And immortal brother can think of your soul. The mortal brother can think of yourselves. So at the beginning there's fighting, or the mortal brother doesn't know the existence of the immortal brother. Eventually they have to learn to join hands and serve. So the duality is here in number 3. The pious attendants and hermit Buddhists, so we're now going back to the Theravada tradition, are obscured in this respect because up till now, as I said, they're still the Theravada tradition. The Mahayana had not yet come into existence. It didn't really come in, well, technically at the time of Nagarjuna. He was born about 150 AD, so something like 200 AD. That's when the Mahayana came, so 100 to 200, depending, or a bit earlier, because Nagarjuna had a teacher, Saraha, the arrow maker. There's a 500-year period, basically, of still all of these schools. And that includes the time of Ashoka, who conquered India and basically spread Buddhism all the way to India and Ceylon. That was Theravada Buddhism. Okay, so these pious attendants and the Prajika Buddhas or hermit Buddhas are obscured in this respect by their attachment to the subject-object dichotomy. And so you can see we get to the third passage and you get the subject-object dichotomy, which is Gemini, right? The twins. And so this is dialectics. And this subject-object dichotomy, dialectics, is also mainstream Western philosophy. That's really what it's all about, arguing about these things. Subject, God. Object, well, what is the ramifications of God and things like that. It still doesn't get you to properly understanding what mind is. And you can see with Buddhism, everything is mind. It's really an understanding of mind. Okay, we're going up to number 4, and 4 is Cancer. So you can see it's actually progressing quite well through the signs of the zodiac. Now, in Cancer, you get birthing, right? Cancer is the sign of birthing. And it's the sign of incarnation, of mass incarnation. So what is birthed in Cancer is the Mahayana stream. And so we get the adherents of Madhyamaka, which is the middle road, and the Madhyamaka is the Mahayana. It's technically also Buddhism. Buddhism is the middle between extremes, and that's what Madhyamaka means. And from Madhyamaka, you get Madhyamika. And the Madhyamika are those that follow or develop the concept of shunyata, the void. And we, in our philosophy, shunyata, which is the whole objective of Buddhism to gain experience of, we know that shunyata I equated with buddhi, and it's the 4th plane between the 7. So you get adi, anapadaka, atma, then you get buddhi or the realm of shunyata, then you get the mental plane or manas, and then you get the astral plane and the physical plane. And so Madhyamaka is the middle between all the extremes of the philosophies. And so this brings in the concept of the void. So that is what is born. And so we now gone to the time of Nagarjuna, as I said, about 100 AD, 150 AD. So the adherents of the Madhyamaka are obscured by the attachment to the extremes of the two truths. So before there was subject-object dichotomy, and that's philosophical debate. Now we're talking about two truths. And what are the two truths? One truth is emptiness, which is shunyata, and the other truth is samsara, which is another term for that could be called the plenitude. The all that we're living in and we're confused by. All of us living in samsara, we're trying to obtain shunyata or emptiness of samsara, but with the two truths of this dichotomy between samsara and shunyata, whereas the Madhyamaka school on the whole are confused because they're too focused upon shunyata. And this particular philosophy here is a Yogacarya Madhyamaka or Yogacarya Madhyamika philosophy. And therefore, no, it's not shunyata. This is where they're confused, they're too focused upon that. And it's not samsara, it's the middle between the extremes. So Cancer, therefore, is the birthing of this second main school of Buddhism. Now, we move from Cancer to Leo. And Leo is the crux of it all. The Leonine energy is that of the mind. It's the self-concept, the I concept. It's individualization. Humanity individualizes in Leo. And also it's the soul itself. And the soul exists on the higher mental plane. So we're going now to Leo. And now in Leo, now with the self-concept, it's the individual such as you or I working to obtain enlightenment. And so they start immediately here, the practitioners of Kriya Tantra and Yoga Tantra are obscured by the attachment to extremes of ritual service and attainment. Now, he misses out one of the tantras here, and that is what's called Ubheya Tantra or Karya Tantra. I explain these in my books, but Kriya means action. And in our philosophy, we translate this Kriya Tantra to Hatha Yoga. So it's the bodily postures. It means ablutions, cleansings, fastings, all of those things that relate to making the body pure. And so all of these types of practices relating to the ritual of the body, and then all of those yoga postures that you see, this here is Kriya Tantra. And then Yoga Tantra is the Raja Yoga, the yoga of the mind. So he basically is saying here, in Leo, you can see that the yoga of the mind is exemplified by the Leonine attributes, the personality shining sun-like. And so we've now moved to that fifth petal of the heart lotus. In between them, those two, now all of you have an idea of Raja Yoga. That's what all of you essentially are, Raja Yogins at this particular stage. You contemplate on meditation to produce pristine cognition of the mind through the yogic skillful means to realize the reality of mind, the Alaya Vijnana. So everything to do with the awakening of the enlightened mind is this Raja Yoga, or what is here called Yoga Tantra. So they are obscured by the attachment to extremes of ritual service and attainment. Now, as I said, in between these two is Bhakti Yoga. In Buddhism, this form of yoga is actually called deity yoga. You know, the Hare Krishnas sort of chanting, that's Bhakti Yoga. But in Buddhism, this is deity yoga, and all of you are practitioners of deity yoga also. So you can see the three yoga systems, the Raja Yoga and the cleansing of the body, making the body pure, a vehicle for the divinity to manifest. You manifest this Karya Tantra through your devotion to ritual. And with the Karya Tantra, the deity Tantra is also the religious symbols. For instance, all of you have your shrines, and on your shrines are the images. For instance, the image of Guru Rinpoche or of Master Kuthumi or Krishna or any of the deities, the Christ, and then all the mandalas that come with that. When you're using those images as an object of meditation, as an object of your ritual service, then that is Karya Tantra, deity yoga. And so it's a form of worship of the deity. And with that, you get, for instance, with the Christians, it's the concept of Jesus or the Christ. And most Buddhists have concepts of Avalokitesvara or Amitabha or whatever it is that is their principal deity that they give obeisance to. Tibetans, especially with the 1,000-armed Avalokitesvara and Kuan Yin there. So all of that's this form of Tantra. So it's the image that are given to you in your meditations that leads you there. So this form of yoga or yoga tantra relates to attainment of the second initiation. And so your meditative mind, which I call meditation or seed, produces the second initiation. This is what you've been doing. The Kriya Tantra relates to the attainment of the first initiation. And the Yoga Tantra relates to the attainment of the third initiation, what I call the Alaya Vijnana, enlightenment. And so basically what Guru Rinpoche is saying here is that in the sign Leo, that these forms of yoga also have their problems. And the problem is ritual service and attainment. They are too attached to these extremes. And at a certain stage of your meditation or yoga practice, you must let go of them as well. But you're not there yet. First, you must take your third initiation, and then you start to walk towards your fourth. We move from Leo to Virgo. Virgo is, in a sense, the Deva kingdom. Leo is the human kingdom. And Virgo embodies all substance, all forms. The Devas embody all of that. It's the concept of the Divine Mother. And here, in this particular phrase or stanza of this book, as I said, none of this astrological information was given in my writings. I didn't want to get too carried away of too much obscurity for what I expected to be Buddhist readers. So I just omitted it. But I'm giving it to you so that it can be this way included in the book. So Virgo is the practitioners of Maha Yoga and Anu Yoga, obscured by their attachment to extremes of space and awareness. So space and awareness is Virgo. It's the space of substance, or the space of shunyata, or the space of the mind. Whatever is space and awareness, there's aspect of mind there, and that is the Deva. Now, Maha just means great. And Anu in Sanskrit is infinitesimal. So the great yoga, which is beyond Raja Yoga, and that which brings the concept of the mind to the infinitesimal space or spaciousness or the vastness of space, and the awareness associated with it, or the minute observation, the infinitesimal observation of the nature of mind, observing the awareness of space. It's very difficult to explain because we're now going into very, very abstract Buddhist metaphysical thought. So we're going into, there's 6 types of yoga. And, I've mentioned also there's one that's missing here. Now, with my notes here, with Maha Yoga, I'm looking at this book by Dujom Rinpoche, and he says it unites the mind to the non-dual truth, which is shunyata, the direct perception of intrinsic awareness, which is the shunyata samsara fusion, pristine cognition without abiding in anything. And my books, in many ways, speaks of this samsara shunyata fusion. And so most of my Buddhist books are really talking about Maha Yoga, a level of expression. Though I go to the Ati Yoga, which is the highest. Now, this particular level brings you from the attainment of the third initiation right through to the experience of the fourth initiation level before actually taking the fourth initiation level. So it's the abstract, pristine cognition beyond mind, but still has the elements of mind. This is Maha Yoga, Anu Yoga. And Anu Yoga connects Maha Yoga to the creative stage of the extremely perfect yoga, which is the highest of all the yogas, which is Ati Yoga. And the Ati Yoga is what the Nyingma traditions teaches with Guru Rinpoche teachings. So that which connects is the fourth initiation experience proper, the absolute depth of any concept of mind. They still are obscured by their attachment to the extremes of space and awareness. In other words, the spaciousness, which you can call shunyata, and awareness. And what he's saying is there's a step beyond that, which is just simply pure awareness or pure spaciousness. It's non-dual. It's neither one or the other. It's the complete fusion of both, and that is Ati Yoga. So then we get to Libra, the liberal petal, and then he says here, all these practitioners stray from the point because they polarize the non-dual reality or meditative abstractions. So we're now at the sign Libra, and Libra is the hub of the wheel. You can think of Libra as the wheel of samsara turning, but what Libra really is the very, very hub of that wheel, the very center of it. Everything moves, but the Libran meditative mind is in abstraction. It's the holding the breath aspect. So it is in-breathing, holding the breath, and then out-breathing. Now, the in-breathing stage of meditation is doing all your sadhanas, all the practices, all the rituals, everything that gets you there. And the holding the breath stage, and you're not expected to hold your breath for 5 or 10 or whatever minutes, it's just simply absorption in the meditation stage, where you're not aware of your body, of mind, of space. You're just purely absorbed in the reverie of the experience, of the cognition, if you wish, of the awareness. There's no subject-object duality. There's just simply pure experience. I don't know how I can better explain that. I know all of you have had touches of this, where you've lost yourself. There's no concept of your body, no concept of your mind. It can be for a fraction of a second. Just simply direct revelatory experience of something. And then you find yourself back in your body. And you may have experienced virtually the whole universe awakening in a fraction of a second. And without knowing where you was or what you're doing or whatever. And then you wake back into your body. And then all of a sudden you say, oh gee, I've got to write this down. And you can spend weeks and weeks trying to write down what you experienced in that duration. I call it duration of being because it's beyond sense, beyond time. So this is Libra. So they polarize the non-dual reality. What he's talking about is a very, very high point of attainment, of course. He's trying to explain Ati Yoga, which is the highest of all the yogas. And when we get to Ati Yoga, what he's explaining is the fifth initiation, which is the great perfection. So what he's saying is they have not yet attained the ability to reside in this particular state of experience at all times. See, we can, and that includes myself, can have, I can call it the intuition, pratyaksha, flashes of revelation where we lose concept of space, time, ourselves, etc. But it's for a short duration. Think of a mind that lives in that space all of the time, whilst existing in a physical body and doing physical plane activities. Yes?
I have a couple of questions, Bodo. This absorption you mentioned, I understand that the more you progress, the more energies you get when you are in this non-conceptual state. Is it like that? Because you can be empty of thought, but if you don't receive the energies from sunyata, then what is the point to be empty of thought?
Yeah.
So are you receiving energies when you are in this state progressively in relation to your attainment or progress?
Okay, what we're talking about here is far beyond what you're talking about. If you can think of a yogin, now, so say we go to Tibet, it's got a good place to go to, and just think of somebody in the high Himalayas, and that yogin has been there for 10 years in some cave, virtually non-stop meditation. And he's referring to people like that when we're talking about these higher states of yoga, their continuous practice. It's no longer emptiness of thoughts, they have already brought into their whole system. They've awakened Tumo, the yoga of the psychic heats. They've awakened the pranas in their nadis. Kundalini has been awakened. It's flowing. The energy fields are already well established. So we're talking about people already with siddhis, with psychic powers. It's the subtle discernments within their mind of their level of attainment. And as I said, I can only sort of just trying to give you an idea from the third initiation. Once you've mastered Yoga Tantra or Raja Yoga, you're a third degree initiate. In other words, you're fused already with your soul. The consciousness of the soul or the layer is known as yours. But you still got these steps of the Maha Yoga, Anu Yoga, Ati Yoga ahead of you. And these three levels of yoga lead you from the third initiation, when you first take it, fused with your soul, to the fourth initiation, and then the fifth initiation, where you become a full master of wisdom. You hear what he's talking about with Ati Yoga. We're talking about the consciousness of a master of wisdom, the type of spaciousness. So Dharmakaya is the term that I often use in my book. You can call it the mind of God, theistically, to be at one with that mind or an aspect of that mind, reveling in it. So the energy field is quite intense that you're buried. When it comes to Buddhism, you can see, especially when you go to yoga philosophy, you're talking about these high, exalted states of mind. It's not where average people are at. Think of yogis and the attainment of yogins. They hardly eat food, they hardly sleep, they're sitting mostly in a meditation posture and going through these stages of experience. Not all of them get to this stage, even Dujom Rinpoche. We're talking about the highest possible attainments in a physical body while still having a physical body. So it's difficult to explain. And then we go to Scorpio, and Scorpio is the sign of testings. But the Scorpio is an interesting sign. It's one of my favorite signs in many, many ways, because it's the sign of energy. Scorpion's the sting. You'll understand the sting of desires, the sting of sense perceptions, and all of the other things that you might be attached to. But that's the lower aspect of Scorpio. It's also the sting of intuition, the sting of high revelation. I think of the Scorpion as an arc. It's an arc descending, high metaphysics for you. If we think, say, in terms of mandalas, and mandalas are squares and triangles and all sorts of shapes like that. But actually, the term mandala, it really means circle. And so what's contained within a circle? But when you get into the higher dimensions, so monadic perception, which is the spirit or Dharmakaya, is the perception of the interrelationships of circles, of spheres of attainment. And when two circles cross, then you get arcs. So Scorpio stings you as an enlightened being with arcs of revelation that are the result of two circles crossing. Now, I'll give you sort of an example of a circle. For instance, you can think of the Earth revolving around the sun. That's a circle. Oh, it's more egg-shaped, but anyway, let's call it the circle. The sun revolving around its cosmic center, it's another circle. Now, the suns, as they move, there's the physical movement, but there's also subjective movements, astral bodies, mental bodies, and so forth. And so the movements cross each other in space. And when they cross each other, they convey the spirit or the information contained within that circle into another circle by means of the arc of the crossover. I give an illustration in my books of mind, and I've got one sphere, one circle, which is the abstract mind or the enlightened mind, and I've got another circle that crosses over it, which is the mind of empirical consciousness. And so when the two circles cross, there you have in between the soul. So that type of crossover, that's what Scorpio stings you as an enlightened being. It's very difficult to explain, but I hope you get an idea of it. So again, this term pratyaksha, which I use often, and I use it in a different way often than in the books, but it means this sting, this intuitive flash. It can be a whole ocean of realization with that sting. So an intuitive flash is Scorpio, if that makes sense to you. So you've got the lower sting of desires and petty emotions and all those sorts of things. And then you got the higher sting of high liberated realizations, aspects of Dharmakaya. And so we're up to here, the 8th petal of the heart lotus of Buddhism, Scorpio. Since they fail to unify these extremes in non-duality, they do not attain Buddhahood. So what he's referring to here is Buddhahood, is proper Buddhahood, or what really is the 5th initiation. So all of these aspects have to be united in non-duality, neither this nor that. The master's mind sees the duality. Whenever you use mind, it discriminates between this and that. But the place of resonance of the master, or the place of resonance of the master's mind, is beyond this and that. It's cosmic in its conceptology. And samsara is, well, the illusion. It's the world of service. The master's mind and the 4th degree initiate's mind, and all of you, you're learning this, that the purpose is to liberate those who are engrossed in spheres of illusion and illusional activities that produce karma that bind you to form, to bring you into the higher dimensions, away from the concept of form. So every aspect of the master's mind is to pull you out of samsara. The duality, the master can go into it, but is not attached or attracted to that in any way. 9 is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is thus all those beings continue to roam in cyclic existence. Continue to roam in cyclic existence is Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is also ambition. And I've got here a sort of selfish ambition. So it means that Sagittarius directs them, or the archer finds them back into samsara, which is samsaric existence. And so they continue roaming because of the problems. They still have reincarnation, still have karma. So there's the two things. One is to deal with the arrows of desire, ambition, and the other is the archer firing you back into samsaric existence. Then we get to Capricorn. Because they persistently engage in forms of renunciation, which is the climbing of the mount. As you climb the mount of initiation, which is Capricorn, you renounce this, you renounce that, you let go of that, until there's nothing left to let go of. There's nothing left to renounce. You're absorbed in the stream of direct realization, pristine cognition, Dharmakaya. Whatever your level of attainment is that you're aspiring to according to your past life's achievements. And then you get to Aquarius, and in acts of rejection and acceptance with regards to their own minds. So you got rejection and acceptance, that's the wavy band of the Aquarian, and the mind itself is that free-flowing energy field of the Aquarian. I've got here in my little notes, bodhisattva ideals. And then 12, Pisces, where in reality cyclic existence and nirvana are inseparable. Pisces is a difficult sign to properly grasp. It's the last sign of the zodiac, and it normally means ending or termination. It's also the sign of the avatar, of bringing down the highest possible experiences. So cyclic existence and nirvana are inseparable, and so this is a Piscean attribute. Piscean is esoterically is Jupiter, and esoterically is Pluto. We're in Pisces still now, as I mentioned earlier on. And so that's the second ray, which is Jupiter, the first ray, which is Pluto, producing this death to the form, or the first ray, which integrates them all into a oneness. The Piscean quality is the two fishes, nirvana and samsara, are yoked by a band. And so the Pisces symbol is the two circles or semicircles, which are the fishes, and they yoked, bonded. And so nirvana is one, samsara is the other, and they're inseparable because they bonded by form, by that yoke, by their antakarana. So we're all one fish swimming in samsara, and then there's our higher selves, another fish, and we are working to be absorbed or integrated with our higher self. When we're integrated, then that bond is cut. Pisces no longer exists, and we move back to Aries. Now, these last points here, from Scorpio to number 12, is Ati Yoga. It's the highest of the yoga, and it's called the Great Perfection. And it holds the expanse of reality, and I'm using Dujom Rinpoche here, original pure mind as such, inner radiance, pristine cognition that spontaneously abides in oneself in the ground of great perfection. What it really means is that nirvana and samsara, cyclic existence of samsara, right, are inseparable. In other words, the fully enlightened being sees them both as one expanse of being. There's no differentiation. This basically, in the Ati Yoga, or the form of Buddhism, which I teach in my books here, is this riding of samsara to nirvana. In other words, you don't reject samsara. You don't aspire for nirvana. You use samsara as the vehicle of enlightenment. Now, what this really means is that what you're doing is you're writing out your karma. You cannot get there if you have all this karmic baggage behind you, dragging you on. You must live out your karma. And as you live out your karma, your enlightened mind is working out the karma so it dissipates and no longer is. There's nothing left. And so as you ride the karma and you cleanse the karma through your actions of compassion and service work, eventually what is left is Buddhahood. There's nothing left to bring you into or to reincarnate you into samsara. You are Buddha, you live into cosmic space. You've taken your sixth initiation. And so this Ati Yoga is this process of merging samsara with, I'll use the term shunyata, but it's a higher concept than that even. Shunyata itself is just a mirror. What shunyata is a mirror, or that which reflects the Dharmakaya, which is the mind of God, or the mind of cosmos, or the originating mind, whatever it is that caused everything to come into being and which will dissolve everything back into it. And that is what you experience and learn to experience in this process of the Ati Yoga, which is what I'm teaching you. Therefore, it's not necessary being celibate or not celibate. It's not necessarily having a lot of sexual encounters or not having sexual encounters. It's not necessarily eating a lot or not eating a lot. It's not necessarily avoiding this type of activity or not avoiding this type of activity. What it means is understanding the mode of the manifestation of karma and directing it all in such a way as to produce compassionate deeds that liberates those around you and liberates you from the necessity to incarnate again Therefore, this brings in skillful means, all the bodhisattva virtues, everything. So the entire samsara is used as a mechanism of liberation of all around. And as you liberate them, you liberate yourself. And we all ascend to become Buddhas, and all in our different ways. And this then is the mind of a master of wisdom. And so this is the path that I'm teaching you, and the path that you are learning, how to free yourself from your own karma. But your karma is not just your karma, it's integrated with a group. It's group karma. And you can see, therefore, the group that we have here, we have integrated karma. And the integrated karma is good and bad karma. We've done some not so good things to each other. We've done some very nice things to each other and other people around us that we're interrelated with. And this is, again, the reason for the homework that I've just mentioned with regards to the Zen Buddhist life. We bring forward the Zen Buddhist life because there's integrated karma there. We may not have known each other then, but probably we did one way or the other. And it's to discover that, to work that out. Whatever it was, it's cleansed as we work out our lives. So your path as a yogin or a yogini is to become aware of this as you travel onwards. And so the wisdom is the awakening of the perceptions that allows you to be cognizant at any moment of what is happening and why, past, present, and future. Because the three times, Mahakala, the three faces of time, is your cognition as an enlightened being in this form of yoga, this Ati yoga. I hope all that makes sense to you. No, none of us are fully there yet, not myself either. I know more about it all than you, but we're all getting there because my path is also dependent on your path. Does that make sense to you? As I move upwards, I've got to help you also to move up. And as you move upwards, you've got to help those around you to move up. And as we manifest this gravity to a higher center, moving up, then more energies can come down into us. It liberates our substance. It liberates our minds. And this is the bodhisattva path. This is the Hatha Yoga. So I cannot descend unless I draw with me all of those that I have the greatest amount of, if you wish, spiritual karma with. It's not so much the people that I'm living in this house who knows the conditions. These are still part of it, still karma from some life, but they're not my direct concern. My direct concern are you, my if you want, siblings, my spiritual brothers and sisters, and others that we still have yet to meet. They're still out there. That'll come to us because they are our siblings, right? Now, our brothers at the monastery, they have their siblings and they have a lot of karma with them, but that's one level. And then there's this esoteric level. So the esoteric level is a different category. When I'm talking about, for instance, this woman coming from America, well, that's another one, right? It's one with whom there's a lot of karma. And we don't know yet as we go into the future. And let's say 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever into the future, who else is to come? Who else there is strong karma with? And who stays with the teachings? Because those that can follow this form of teaching, which is the highest of the yogas, will get to this high initiation level, all of you. So think of it in terms of karma, karmic attachments, and you can call karmic attachments samskaras, klishas, or whatever, these terms, or you can think of it in terms of desires and emotions and all those forms of attachments to people and whatever. But all of those things are left behind as we grow as a group. We grow as a group together. This is group evolution. We sail the same boat to nirvana, to shunyata. I can be called the captain of the ship. You're the sailors, and you have different sort of responsibilities within the same ship, but we're all in the same ocean. The wind is blowing us in that one direction. And above me, of course, we have our teachers, my teachers, your teachers, the lords of Shambhala, and so forth, all obeying the same laws, working the same way. That's the reason why an earth sphere is formed in the first place. It's this higher form of yoga. Karma, that's the fundamental thing to work out. Good or bad. We don't avoid the bad. We don't avoid the good either. I mean, we prefer the good, but, like Jesus, he didn't avoid the fact that he needed to be crucified. Now, I know if I was Jesus in that life, I know if you, all of you, you can think in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was arrested, what would you think if you knew that the next day there's going to be some soldiers come, they're going to take you and torture you and finally nail you onto a cross? Would you go willingly? Or would you say, oh no, I think I'll shove that off for another life? See, this is the nature of an enlightened being, one following this particular Ati Yoga. He knew that that's what he had. It wasn't easy for him. He spent all night and he asked his 12 to stay awake. We can look at another imagery, for instance, looking at this Ukraine war. If that something happened like that to you, and you have to go into a war situation and you're going to be maimed, you see the image. Are you going to go in or are you going to stay out? And see, what I'm trying to say is that this type of enlightened being will always work out, always manifest that action that will produce the cleansing of the karma and the liberation or the helping of the people around, no matter whatever happens personally to the individual. What happens to the individual is not so important. What is the cleansing action of fixing up the karma and riding that karma to enlightenment? That is the important thing. Now, the thing behind that is the fact that before you and before I, now this was a question our dear sister asked me about karma, and I sent you all an answer, is that all of us, because we are spiritual liberated beings, initiates on the inner realm, before we come into incarnation, the higher the initiate, it just means that you've got to work out faster streams of karma. Before you come into incarnation, you meditate and you say, what karma am I going to cleanse in this life? What is the course of actions that's going to produce the cleansing of that karma in such a way that other people can benefit by it and therefore be pulled on towards hierarchy, and I'll become liberated, enlightened, awakened. In that life, now not every life is to be awakened fully. For instance, some of our European lives, it was just simply to do some service work because there was karma involved, and some people messed up because often it works out this way. You have one life in a place like Tibet and you meditate a lot, you do liberate yourself, gain the awarenesses, and then once you've gained that, then next life you're into the Western world. We're talking about, say, the epoch of kings and queens, and then you have to live out what you realized in the former life when you're, for instance, in Japan as a Zen monk, or in India as a yogi, or in Tibet, and then next life, bang, in your Western world, in a Western body, there's a king and queen that you're serving, or you may be a king or queen, or something like that. You've got lots of money. And now, how are you going to use that wisdom you gained before practically in that life? And will you mess up? And lots of us have. Like Poch was in the Inquisition, she's suffered massively as a consequence, though she's a very high spiritual being. So this is part of the educational process. It's a one step, two step. Sometimes it's one step forward, 2 steps back. But every life eventually will lead you there. So those lives where we've messed up, we have to work out, and your higher self works out the karma and say, now, this life, I'm going to fix up that mess that I did in that earlier life, for instance, life of Inquisition or whatever. We can go into many different types of lives, the life of being in a war. There's been many wars with all 7th ray disciples in the whole 1st ray. Believe me, the 1st ray, 7th ray, the ray of warriors, many wars, and so many opportunities to, I'll use the phrase mess up because it means, just abusing your position of power in one way or the other, stealing, or the phrase is rape, pillage, or plunder, or just being a king or queen or baron, robber baron, the phrase, you're baron or earl or lord or something like that, 300 years ago, and underneath you had your castle or whatever, and underneath you are all these serfs, maybe hundreds of them. How did you treat them? Did you treat them well? Did you give them a good life and a happy life, or did you just steal from them their labor? It's that sort of thing. So everything has to be fixed up. So to do this wisely, appropriately, in a physical body, and as you become more and more enlightened, that's riding your karma to enlightenment, that is Hatha Yoga. Whereas the other forms of yoga, it's mainly more like our brothers are doing, the celibate lifestyle, or focusing upon meditation or something like that, but more for themselves. That's the other forms. Whereas this is different. And it's much, much, much harder to gain enlightenment whilst we're in a physical body, within a Western, no, I'm going to use the term Western, but within this materialistic environment, and having to deal with all of those distractions and all the money problems and all the rest of it, and somehow focus ourselves towards becoming enlightened. You can see the difficulty. So it's neither one or the other. If the karma is to lead you into monastery, that's the karma. That's what you ride. If the karma is to lead you into making children, that's the karma, and that's what you ride. You don't discriminate, but you know internally what is right. You know internally the path for you. Or you meet somebody like me that can help guide. And I connect you to the masters of wisdom because they are all our teachers. That is the path. And all of these yogas we've just mentioned, those are the steps. So it's basically simple. It's not to avoid Hatha Yoga or to avoid Raja Yoga or to avoid Karya Yoga. These are all parts of the process. You can't get to the highest form of yoga until you've done the others. That's pretty obvious. It's like you can't get to university until you've done primary school and high school and all of that. You've got to actually do the elementary work before you can do the higher forms of work. Okay, any questions? Oh, hello, yes.
I was wondering, see if that statement is false or not. When we were talking about sunyata, I was wondering, I don't know where exactly what initiation part I'm at, but you will know better than me. But I was wondering, like, there's obviously moments where you have this sort of deep silence, which rather feels more like a very large spaciousness. And I was wondering, like, could that be considered like an introduction to the sunyata state, or is that false? Like, is that just not, is that far from it?
It is an introduction, yes, to the sunyata stage. It depends on people's intrinsic initiation level. All of you here either the 3rd initiation, and there's some that are the 4th initiation, and those are of the 4th initiation, which means that they have taken their 4th in a past life, or they are in this life to take their 4th. It means that the experience of shunyata is intrinsic to them. Those that are the 3rd initiation are much more mentalistic. And it's what we call the alaya vijnana, the domain of mind, and the nature of the enlightened mind that comes. Well, there's a distinction between the two. But as I said, there's a gradual movement from the 3rd to the 4th, and some that are from the 4th that are moving towards becoming masters of wisdom in our group. And so there's different inherent capacities of receiving the pure experience of shunyata or even beyond that. And that is evident, of course, to me, not necessarily evident to you or to the others, but the higher intrinsically you are, the more you're aware of where the others around you are, because of the spirituality that's been gained from your past lives, awakenings, your initiation level, as I call it. So the initiation level is what pushes you onwards. And the higher you are as an initiate, the more it's expected of you. And normally the faster you've got to cleanse karma. It's a more rapid movement. I hope you're all enjoying Buddhism. It's not that easy to properly understand. It's a difficult philosophy because there's so much to it, especially this esoteric form of Buddhism which you're learning now.